First-time gun owners at risk for suicide, major study confirms. Men were 8 times as likely to kill themselves by gunshot than non-owners. Women were 35 times as likely. Men were 8 times as likely to kill themselves by gunshot than non-owners. So how exactly does a non-gun owner person kill themselves by gunshot? By stealing or renting a gun, I'd guess. That's why most gun ranges will report people who try to show up and rent a gun and only buy a couple bullets, because it's a pretty clear intent to commit suicide. No one going to the shooting range for fun only wants 2 to 3 bullets. Edit. For the 5,000 people informing me that they've never seen anywhere selling bullets individually, I'm aware of that. I never mentioned someone successfully buying only a couple bullets at a time. I mentioned someone showing up only wanting to buy a couple bullets. And for the other people telling me about only firing a couple of .50 cal bullets at a time, I'm aware of that too, but there are other reasons for a newbie not to go straight from never held a gun to a gun of that caliber. This is mostly referring to more common handgun-sized rounds. Most gun ranges that offer gun rentals will tend to only rent out guns to people who either brought a gun with them or brought a friend with them. The exception would be for a first-time gun buyer who wants to try a few different guns before taking one home. In that case, the range will try to have someone be very close by to help as much as possible. Nobody wants to deal with a suicide on their property during business hours. I personally know 2 people that committed suicide by firearm and neither owned the firearm. Yeah, but how many people become gun owners right before they kill themselves? And how many people commit suicide using other methods? This statistics is meaningless. It's like saying 100% of people who stab themselves own a sharp knife. The gun doesn't make you more suicidal. If you are suicidal and you also happen to own a gun, well, you're probably going to use the gun vs the knife. Rates of suicide by any method were higher among handgun owners, with an adjusted hazard ratio of 3.34 for all male owners as compared with male non-owners, 95% confidence interval CI, 3.13 to 3.56, and 7.16 for female owners as compared with female non-owners, 95% CI, 6.22 to 8.24. This is the statistic I searched for after reading the very specific title, thanks. The result is more consistent with the conclusion that suicidal people are more likely to acquire handguns, than that buying a handgun makes one suicidal. It would make sense that someone contemplating suicide would acquire multiple means, whereas there is no suggestions of a way in which the mere presence of a handgun would cause someone to be more likely to strangle or poison themselves. Kinda like death by snoo is more prevalent among men who have a partner willing to participate. As my personal solo attempts will attest. Car owners were shown to be 8 times more likely to get in an accident than non-car owners. Exactly. I hate it when statistics are skewed this way. Say instead, gun owners have a 3% increased suicide rate and prefer to use their gun as means of suicide. Edit. It turns out a more accurate headline would be something like this. Gun owners as a group are more likely to have a successful suicide, 3x more likely for men, 7x more likely for women. The suicides are more likely to occur in the first week of gun ownership, so further investigation of first-time gun purchases as an indicator of suicidal intent is needed. Even that is not defining causation, because many of these gun owners are people who bought guns solely for suicide. That in no way means that if you currently own a gun now, you are more likely to commit suicide. Of course, suicidal people who buy guns specifically to kill themselves are more likely to kill themselves. The article discusses this. But that is only the start of the data. The risk of dying by suicide, from any cause, remains elevated even if you have owned the gun for years. Does it presuppose that owning a gun creates more risk of suicide? Or is it that a gun owner who eventually becomes suicidal chooses the gun as a quick method to escape? They are going to kill themselves either way. I don't see the importance of focusing on the tool they use. Edit. I'm appreciative of a lot of the informed responses to my last sentence, thank you. I assume the rates exponentially increases for suicidal firearms owners since using a gun may be the easiest and most effective way out. People without the access to such guns in a similar suicidal situations may carry on living since there aren't any other safe and comfortable alternatives that they're willing to use. They are going to kill themselves either way. They aren't though. They study this extensively. Suicidal people are very often not determined. Suicidal ideation is sporadic. It comes and it goes. If you prevent a person from committing suicide in the short term, the desire to kill themselves often just goes away. Either because the circumstances of their life changes, or just because of the way brain chemistry is hard to predict. So basically non-gun owners are less likely to kill themselves with a gunshot. Who would have guessed? Groundbreaking new study confirms people who hang themselves more likely to own rope. We have only the best politically slanted scientific studies here in r/science. Hard to commit suicide with a gun if you don't have one. Just saying. If someone is going to try to kill themselves, a gun attempt is much more successful than cutting/pills. A person with gun is more likely to kill themselves with that gun than someone without a gun. That's like saying a suicidal person with a knife is more likely to kill themselves with a knife than someone without a knife. People with pools in their house are more likely to drown than people without pools at their house. Did you know? In the vast majority of cases where someone died of bullet wounds, a firearm was involved.